Dan O'Shea is a former U.S. Navy SEAL and a former coordinator for the hostage working group with the U.S. Embassy in Iraq, and he joins me now. Dan O'Shea, thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Obviously, it's good to see the pictures of that mother and daughter being released, but why do you think two people were released, and why do you think they were released now?
Well, your last correspondent nailed it. It's about delaying this inevitable IDF ground assault into Gaza. And these hostages, every one of them are going to be, pawns in this whole debate. And frankly, hostage terrorism and grabbing hostages, this is how terrorist organizations like Hamas negotiate with the West. And so this is a brutal tactic, violates every law of armed conflict statute out there. But this is why they did it, because they grabbed parents, grandparents, children, women and children beyond the soldiers. And so it was a very effective tool because it is going to challenge. There'll be a lot of pressure on Israel not to start this ground invasion. And so we can expect more similar tactics like this. It's a great news story. It's amazing. I'm very happy for the family and for this mother and daughter. It's incredible news. But their nightmare has ended. But there's 200 more whose nightmare continues.
Do you think it'll be an effective tactic in terms of trying to delay the invasion by the Israel Defense Forces? Because the rhetoric suggests that they're going to go soon, but there are 200 people being held.
Listen, the invasion by IDF forces should have happened within a week, and I guarantee the hostage situation has thrown every planning consideration. It's the key factor for the IDF because there's intense pressure from the West, from America, any country that has hostages. They're going to be putting pressure on the IDF because the IDF, Hamas already stated that they will start executing hostages if the Israeli Defense Forces airstrikes continue, and or you can presume with the invasion. So yes, this is the deciding factor right now, is the hostage situation going on in Gaza.
We know that the Red Cross was involved in this, but Qatar seems to be a really key player in this. What do you make of the role that country is playing in these negotiations? How do you think that's working behind the scenes?
Qatar has become the Switzerland of the Middle East. They have become very effective. They were critical in the Bo Bergdahl negotiation. All the negotiations between the Taliban and the U.S. Leadership all happened in Qatar. They're playing a very critical role. It's also the home of Al Jazeera. So there's a lot of behind the scenes going on, and Qatar is central to all of this right now.
We've seen groups like Hamas, whether it's Al-Qaeda or the Taliban or the various offshoots of a lot of these groups, kidnap people in the past. And that's where people like you have come in terms of doing hostage negotiations and trying to secure the release. I don't recall an incident where so many people were taken and an enormous military force was amassed outside the area where they're being held. Just how does that dynamic complicate things beyond, I don't want to say typical hostage negotiations, but you know what I mean. This is a very extraordinary circumstance.
There's nothing like it. There's nothing like. I've been studying hostage terrorism now for 20 plus years, and I've gone back, studied to the 1979 overthrow of the American Embassy. I've interviewed those hostages, some of the guys on the rescue force of the original organization that was stood up to basically launch that rescue mission. And I can tell you, nothing like Gaza. First off, it's one of the most densely populated places on the planet, as opposed to Iraq and Afghanistan, where we had some heavy battles. Ramadi, the recapture of Ramadi after ISIS took over, and obviously Fallujah 1 and 2. But in Iraq and Afghanistan, we own the air, we own the night. We had forward operating bases all over, and we don't have anything like this in Gaza. And it's going to be, and nothing like 200 hostages taken in one incident. So this is unparalleled, and it is going to play out on the world stage in the coming days, weeks, and months, because thankfully this hostage nightmare ended for this mother and daughter after 1 week. For some of these hostages, this is going to continue for months and potential years if past experience with Hamas and Hezbollah and other organizations in that region are going to play out here today.
The fact that these two women were released and they appear to be okay. I know the reason given was for humanitarian concerns because apparently the mother is not well. What can we draw from that in terms of an assessment of how the other 200 people might be, or because we don't even know if they're alive, healthy, we don't know their status. Can we divine anything from today?
Well, this is good news. It's a positive step. Obviously, there may be more acts like this, but again, they've got 200 pawns to play in this. And frankly, this act of charity is wolves dressed in sheep's clothing, to be frank. It's very positive. It's wonderful news for the family. But like I said, there may be more incidents like this, but for the most part, this is going to drag out because the only bargaining chip Hamas has right now are these hostages, and they're going to use them and hold on to them for as long as it takes for them until they feel like they're secure again.
So given that the stated goal of Israel in all of this is the eradication or at least destruction of the military capacity of Hamas and the ground invasion of Gaza, it seems to be the clearest path for them to achieve their stated goal. You've already talked about how Hamas has threatened to execute hostages. There are civilians by the hundreds of thousands inside Gaza. There are these moral and operational challenges that all of that presents to the IDF once they start their operation. How can they do this in a way that protects hostages? Or is it just once the invasion starts, all bets are off?
The problem is that they don't know where all the hostages are being held. Yeah. They could be in 200 different locations. They could be in 50 different locations. But and with the tunneling system that we know exists and how much of it has been mapped out by the Israeli intelligence, there are so many complicating factors that there is no easy way that this is going to play out. But, there's been no, in my mind, I can't think of any battle challenge facing commanders and troops on the ground than knowing that, wherever they're going into Gaza, they're potentially, again, getting in a firefight. They could be getting in a firefight with where the hostages are being held. So again, nothing like it in the history of that I can recall, especially in the modern era. And this is going to play out on the world stage in the coming weeks, days, and months.
So what are you watching for next, Dan O'Shea? I know this is an unprecedented event, as you said, but what we expect to see on the hostage track on that side of the negotiations? What are you watching for?
Well, I'm watching for if indeed when the IDF launch into Gaza and start the ground campaign, and not just the airstrikes, because they've already done a lot of airstrikes. They've taken out a lot of Hamas infrastructure, or presumed infrastructure. There's a lot of devastation already in Gaza. You've got 1 million plus refugees that have moved from the north to the south, or attempted to move from the north to the south. So this thing there is no resolution. I mean, again, every battle plan, no battle plan survives first contact. And there are just so many complicating factors for not only the generals, but the troops on the ground. And, again, no one expected these two to be released like they were. And, but tomorrow this could all change. There could be an execution video in the next hostage scenario. So this will play out, and no one knows at this point.
Yeah, it's grim stuff. Dan O'Shea, former U.S. Navy SEAL and former coordinator for the hostage working group with the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. Thank you so much for your time today.